Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. Ever had an HOA president who thinks they own the whole neighborhood, including your backyard? Mine had my fence torn down and then had the nerve to threaten me. She thought she was enforcing the rules, but she didn't realize I was about to use her own words, a survey map, and the U.S. Postal Service to completely turn the tables. I work with maps and property data for a living, not the kind of maps you pull up on your phone, but the technical legal kind. Parcel boundaries, easements, setback lines, survey plats. I spend most of my days inside GIS software interpreting spatial data for government agencies and engineering firms. The job makes you detail-oriented in a way that most people are not. You learn pretty quickly that a line on a map represents something real, something with legal weight, and that the difference of 2 feet can matter enormously. I bought my house about a year before this whole thing started. It's a nice place, nothing flashy, on a corner lot in a suburban neighborhood governed by a homeowners association. The corner lot situation means my backyard does not back up to another house's yard. Instead, it borders a small landscape strip of common area that the HOA maintains. In that strip, there are a few sprinkler system valve boxes and one larger green utility cabinet that houses the neighborhood's irrigation controller. The whole setup looked like standard neighborhood infrastructure when I moved in. I noticed it, filed it away mentally as something unrelated to my daily life, and moved on. What I did not move on from quickly was the survey. When I was going through the closing process, I actually read my property survey. I know most people don't. It is a technical document full of measurements, bearings, and legal descriptions, and for most home buyers, it is just one more piece of paper to sign and file away. But because of what I do for work, I was curious. I laid it out on the kitchen table the first night I had the keys and spent about 45 minutes going through every section carefully. The fence was already there when I bought the place. 6 feet of solid cedar privacy fencing enclosing the entire backyard. It was in good condition, recently restained, and I liked it. The yard felt enclosed and private. But what I noticed when I traced the property line on the survey was that the fence did not sit on that line. It sat roughly 2 feet inside of it. So between the fence and the actual legal boundary of my land, there was a narrow strip of private property that existed on what looked from the outside like the HOA's side of the fence. From the street or from the common area, you would never know. The fence looked like the edge of my land, but it wasn't. That 2-foot strip was mine, legally and completely. I made a note of it in pencil on my copy of the survey and filed the original in my home documents folder. I figured it was the kind of thing that might matter someday. Maybe if I ever wanted to extend the fence outward, or if there was ever a disagreement about where my land ended. Nothing in the closing process suggested it would ever come up, certainly not within the first year of owning the place. That survey turned out to be the most important document I owned, and I had no idea at the time. The HOA itself was not something I paid much attention to in those first months. I paid my dues on time, kept my lawn tidy, and mostly stayed out of everyone's business. The board was made up of longtime residents, and the clear driving force on it was the president. She was the kind of person who took the role very seriously, more seriously than the position probably warranted. She drove around in a golf cart with a clipboard, leaving notices on windshields and in mailboxes about trash bins being left at the curb too long, flagging houses for exterior maintenance issues, and treating the governing documents like a personal rulebook over which she had final say. A neighbor I sometimes talked to at the mailbox mentioned early on that she had been running the board for close to 8 years and that the 2 previous board presidents had both moved away not long after stepping down. He said it like neighborhood trivia. I filed it away. The first month I lived there, she left a notice about a small oil stain in my driveway. The stain was from the previous owner and had been there before I arrived, but I cleaned it anyway because I had no interest in a conflict that early. About 6 months later, a notice appeared on my mailbox saying my grass was slightly over the permitted height. I measured it when I got inside. It was within spec. I let that one go without responding. That was the full extent of my interaction with her until the fence situation, and I had been hoping to keep it that way indefinitely. That changed on a Thursday afternoon in early fall. I pulled into my driveway after work and knew something was wrong before I got out of the car. On the back left corner of my fence, where it runs closest to the common area, there was a gap, wide and deliberate. 3 fence panels were missing, not broken or fallen over, just absent. I found them around the side of my house, leaning against the wall with their horizontal rails still attached, like someone had unscrewed them from the post cleanly and set them down without any urgency. I stood in the backyard and stared at the gap for probably a full minute. It was roughly 12 feet across. Through it, I could see straight into the common area, the grass strip, the valve boxes, the green utility cabinet. The grass on my side of the fence, right at the opening, was already beaten flat into a clear path. There were tire marks pressed into the turf. Something small, a utility cart or a commercial mower, had already been driven through the gap and into my yard. Through my property, through a hole that someone had cut into my fence without my knowledge, without my permission, and without saying a single word to me. There was no note anywhere, no voicemail on my phone, no message through the HOA portal, no notification from any number or address I recognized. They had come onto my property while I was at work, removed 3 sections of my fence, driven across my lawn, and left without leaving any trace except the damage itself. Before I touched anything, I took photos. I walked the full perimeter of the gap and recorded video, narrating what I was seeing and stating the date and time clearly at the start of the recording. I photographed the tire marks from several angles, got close-up shots of the post holes where the panels had been unbolted, and took wide establishing shots showing the gap in context with the rest of the fence line. Then I photographed the leaning panels against the side of my house, the hardware still attached, showing they hadn't been damaged but had been deliberately removed. I also photographed the path of trampled grass, the direction it ran, and the point where it connected to the HOA's utility area. The whole documentation process took close to 20 minutes. The whole time I was doing it, I wasn't angry the way you might expect. It was more like a cold, focused calm. The same feeling I get when I am looking at a data layer that does not match the underlying survey, and I know I need to figure out where the error is before I do anything else. My brain switched into documentation mode and shut out the rest. There was something almost clarifying about that response. I've thought about it since, and I think it came from the same professional conditioning that makes me want to ground every decision in verifiable data before I act. Some people's instinct when they find their fence panels removed is to immediately start making phone calls and demanding answers in the most direct way possible. I understand that impulse. In a way, the situation warranted it. But I knew from experience that a loud, emotional confrontation produces witnesses and memories and nothing much else. A documented record produces evidence, and evidence was going to serve me far better in the long run. Then I went inside and opened the HOA portal. The neighborhood uses an online management platform for association business. Dues, maintenance requests, announcements, and board communications all run through it. I sent a message to the board that evening, keeping it short and factual. I explained that I had come home to find 3 fence panels removed from my property without any prior contact or consent, that there were signs of vehicle access inside my yard, that the fence was now unsecured, and that I needed to know who had authorized this and why. The response came the next morning. It didn't come from the management company. It came directly from the board president, and the tone of it was something I had to read through twice to fully absorb. She explained, without any apology, that she had personally directed the landscaping contractor to remove the panels because the crew required access to the irrigation equipment for scheduled seasonal maintenance. She said the fence was obstructing what she called a required 10-foot access easement. She said the panels had been left on site for me to reinstall. Then she reminded me that under the HOA bylaws, homeowners were not permitted to obstruct HOA access to utility infrastructure, and that the board retained authority to address obstructions when necessary. There was a line near the end about fines being a possibility for future situations like this one. I read the whole thing 3 times. There was no access easement. Not on my property, not near that fence line, not anywhere in my closing documents. I knew this because I had read the survey carefully a year ago, and because the existence of any recorded easement crossing a corner lot adjacent to HOA infrastructure was exactly the kind of thing I would have flagged during the purchase process. No easement appeared in my closing documents, in the HOA's recorded covenants, or on any plat for the neighborhood. What she was describing did not exist as a legal reality. She had either invented it entirely or had convinced herself that being the board president gave her a right over my land that no document had ever actually granted her. The part about fines was particularly interesting. She was threatening me with fines for failing to accommodate an easement that did not exist, over an action that she herself had initiated on property that was entirely mine. It had the particular flavor of someone so used to being obeyed that they had never once considered the possibility that they were wrong about their own authority. But here is the thing she did not understand about what she had just done. She had put all of it in writing. She had confirmed, in a time-stamped message on a third-party platform with automatic record retention, that she personally directed a contractor to enter my property and dismantle my fence. She gave me her own admission. She handed me the foundation of a legal case, and she did it voluntarily because she genuinely believed she was standing on solid ground. I saved a PDF of the message immediately, exported it to 2 different backup locations, and then closed the laptop. I did not reply. The decision not to respond through the portal was easy. Anything I sent at that point was going to come from frustration, and frustration was not going to help me. What would help me was evidence, and I had a good starting point. Now I needed to build the rest. First, I pulled out my property survey. The original sealed document was right where I had left it 12 months ago. I got a highlighter and marked the relevant measurements: the fence position, the 2-foot gap legal property line, the 2-foot gap between them, the fact that no easement of any kind was recorded anywhere along the back fence line. I also marked the overall lot dimensions to make clear that this was a corner lot with no shared boundary to another residential property on that side. Then I went through the HOA's governing documents. I had saved copies of the bylaws and recorded covenants when I first moved in. I read through them now with a specific purpose, looking for any provision that mentioned access easements, utility corridors, contractor access rights, or any authority that allowed the board to physically alter homeowner structures. There were standards about fence materials and height. There was language about keeping fire hydrant access clear. There were general statements about the board maintaining common areas and hiring contractors for that maintenance. There was nothing, not a single clause or subsection, that established any access easement across private property or gave the board the right to remove part of a homeowner's fence to create a path. The easement she cited in her message did not appear anywhere in the documents she was claiming gave her authority to act. I added the bylaws review notes to my folder and moved to the next step. I called the surveying company that had done my original property survey. I explained in general terms that a property line matter was developing and that I needed the boundary restaked so I had fresh dated documentation. They had availability 2 days out and I booked it. The surveyor arrived that Friday morning while I was working from home. He spent about an hour in the backyard working through the measurements. When he came back to the door to let me know he was done, I went outside and saw what he had left behind. A row of bright orange survey flags on thin metal stakes, each topped with a strip of fluorescent pink ribbon running cleanly along the legal property line at the back left corner of the lot. They were a full 2 feet past my fence on the common area side. I stood there and took photographs until I was satisfied I had captured every angle. The gap in my fence was visible in the background of several of the shots. In the foreground, there was a neat, professionally placed line of markers showing exactly where my property ended and the HOA's common area began. The path that had been worn through my yard, the one the board president claimed was running along a required easement, was cutting directly through land that belonged to me. Not HOA property, not a shared boundary, not an easement corridor, my private property. The surveyor sent over the invoice that afternoon, $450 for the restaking service. I added it to the folder. Next, I called fencing contractors. 3 of them, all licensed and insured, all with solid reviews. I explained to each that fence panels on my property had been removed by a third party without authorization, and I needed professional reinstallation, not just a DIY fix, because I needed documented work with a warranty from a licensed contractor. I asked for written quotes covering labor, any replacement hardware, and the warranty terms. I was deliberate about how I framed it. I did not just ask for a simple reinstall quote. I asked them to assess the condition of the posts and hardware after unauthorized removal, check whether any of the brackets or rails had been stressed or damaged in the process, and quote accordingly. This was not me being dramatic. When fence panels are unbolted and moved around by someone who is not particularly careful about preserving the integrity of the surrounding structure, there is often minor damage to the post brackets or the horizontal rails that you would not notice from a distance but that a professional eye would catch. All three came out over the following week to look at the job. The quotes came back at different amounts, which I expected. The lowest was from a general contractor who did a range of exterior work. The middle quote was from a company with good reviews and a standard service offering. The most expensive was from a company that specialized specifically in cedar privacy fencing. They had been in business for over a decade, carried full insurance, and their quote included a 5-year warranty on both the installation and any materials they touched. Their price was substantially higher than the others, but everything about how they conducted the estimate was professional and thorough. The person who came out spent time checking the condition of the post tops, testing the rail brackets, and explaining exactly what the reinstallation would involve. Their quote reflected that level of care. All three quotes were documented on company paper with license numbers and contact details. All three got added to the folder. I now had everything I needed assembled in one place. The original sealed property survey showing the fence sat 2 feet inside my property line. The brand new professional restaking confirming the exact position of the legal boundary. The board president's own written message in which she admitted directing the contractor to remove my fence. A thorough review of the HOA's own bylaws showing no access easement existed in any provision. A dated invoice for the restaking I had been forced to commission. 3 written contractor estimates for the cost of professional repair. I spent one evening putting together the demand. I didn't use the HOA portal to send it. I printed everything, assembled the attachments in order, and sent the complete package via certified mail with return receipt requested addressed to the HOA's management company. Every member of the HOA board of directors was listed individually as an additional named recipient. The board president was third on the list. The demand itself was written in plain, factual language. It opened by referencing the board president's portal message as confirmation of who had authorized the contractor access. It described the property survey findings and the results of the professional restaking. It stated clearly that no access easement of any kind existed on my property, that the fence sat on my private land, and that the board president had directed a contractor to enter and physically alter that private land without any legal authority to do so. The attachments included the original property survey, photographs of the restaked boundary line with the fence gap visible, the board president's message printed and dated, the restaking invoice, and all 3 contractor quotes. Then came the demands. The HOA would pay for professional reinstallation of the fence panels by the contractor of my choosing. I named the specialty cedar company, the most expensive of the 3. The HOA would reimburse me in full for the restaking service. The HOA board would provide a formal written apology acknowledging the unauthorized entry onto my private property. The consequences for non-compliance were straightforward and specific. If the HOA did not accept all 3 terms in writing within 10 business days of confirmed delivery, I would file a police report for trespassing and destruction of private property, naming the board president specifically as the person who authorized and directed the action based on her own written admission. I would file in small claims court seeking reimbursement for all documented costs and damages, plus any additional relief available given the willful and documented nature of the trespass. And I would send the full documentation package to the HOA's liability insurance carrier with a written explanation of the board's actions and the legal exposure those actions had created for the association. That last point was the one I had thought hardest about because I suspected it was the one that would carry the most weight with the people on the other side of this situation. HOAs carry liability insurance specifically because board members sometimes make decisions that expose the association to legal claims from homeowners or outside parties. Most board members are not lawyers. They are volunteers who stepped up to manage a neighborhood association and who sometimes overestimate what that authority actually covers. The insurance is supposed to be a safety net for those situations. But insurance carriers are not in the business of absorbing unlimited exposure from preventable decisions made without legal basis. The moment an underwriter received a package documenting that a board officer had personally directed an unauthorized entry onto a homeowner's property, removed a fence, arranged vehicle access across private land, and done all of it while citing a legal easement that did not exist anywhere in any recorded document, the association's relationship with that insurer was going to get very uncomfortable very fast. Premium reviews, coverage condition changes, possible exclusions on claims related to future board decisions. Every homeowner in the association contributes to those insurance costs, and board members understand, usually quite quickly, that decisions threatening the association's coverage are decisions other homeowners do not forgive easily. The board president might have been comfortable ignoring my interests. She would have a harder time ignoring the financial interests of the entire neighborhood. I dropped the certified mail at the post office on a Monday morning, got my tracking receipt, and started waiting. For 3 days, there was silence. I confirmed delivery through the tracking system, went to work, came home, and heard nothing from anyone. I wasn't particularly worried. I had done everything correctly and the case was clean. Whatever they were doing on their end was their business and their problem. On the 4th day, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. When I listened back, it was the HOA's treasurer, one of the other board members. He did not sound anything like the board president's portal message had sounded. He sounded stressed and apologetic and slightly at a loss, like someone who had just been handed a situation he hadn't asked for and was not sure how to navigate it. He said the board was reviewing everything carefully and wanted to have a conversation if I was open to it. I called him back later that afternoon and kept it short. I told him that everything the board needed to know was already in the certified mail and that the terms and the timeline were both clearly stated. I was not in a position to negotiate anything over the phone. If the board wanted to respond, the process for doing that was laid out in the document they had received. He thanked me and the call ended fairly quickly. 2 days after that call, I got a letter from a law firm. I want to be honest about how I felt seeing the return address because I think the instinctive assumption is that you'd feel some anxiety at that point. I didn't. The way I read it, the HOA bringing in an attorney was actually a good sign. It meant someone with legal training had sat down with the documentation I sent, looked at the board president's written admission, looked at the survey, looked at the bylaws, and had explained to the board clearly and specifically what they were dealing with. It meant the situation had been taken out of the board president's hands and placed in front of someone whose job was to assess risk accurately. I opened the letter and started reading. Whatever happened next, I felt good about my position. I had done everything by the book. The evidence was clean, the timeline was documented, and the admission was in their own words. I had not threatened anyone verbally. I had not gotten into an argument through the portal. I had not done anything that could be characterized as hostile or unreasonable. I had simply assembled the facts, stated what I was owed, and made clear what would happen if the terms were not met. Everything else was up to them. The letter was from the HOA's attorney, and it was exactly what I had hoped to see. The HOA accepted all 3 terms. The attorney's letter acknowledged that the board president had acted outside the scope of her authority when she directed the contractor to access my property and remove the fence panels. It confirmed that no recorded access easement existed at that location. It stated that the association accepted full responsibility for the incident and would fulfill all financial obligations I had outlined in my demand, everything I had asked for, in writing from their own lawyer. I made a copy, filed the original, and started making calls. The first was to the Specialty Cedar Fencing Company. I told them I was ready to schedule and that billing would go directly to the HOA management company. They were accommodating about it and we locked in a date the following week. The reimbursement check for the survey restaking arrived by courier 2 days after the attorney's letter. $450 drawn on the HOA's operating account. The fence repair happened on a Tuesday afternoon. The crew was efficient. They reinstalled the 3 panels, checked the alignment of the surrounding sections, corrected a minor issue with one of the post brackets that had been slightly bent during the original unauthorized removal, and cleaned up before they left. When they were done, the fence looked better than it had the day I came home to find the gap in it. I watched most of it from the window while I was on a work call. The bill went to the HOA. I never saw the exact figure they paid, but based on the quote I had selected, it was not a small amount. About a week later, the formal written apology arrived from the board. It was signed by every current board member except one. Underneath the signature lines, there was a note from the HOA's attorney explaining that the board president had stepped down from her position pending an internal review of her conduct and was no longer authorized to act on behalf of the association. The language was careful and neutral, written the way lawyers write when they need to communicate something without saying it outright. But the meaning was plain enough. A few weeks after that, I was doing yard work on a Saturday morning, pulling weeds along the back fence line when I glanced up and noticed someone in the common area. One of the other board members was walking slowly across the grass with a measuring wheel, the kind you push in front of you to count distance. He was rolling it carefully from the sprinkler equipment toward the row of orange survey flags I had never pulled up. He reached the flags, stopped, looked at the number on the wheel, and wrote something in a small notebook. Then he looked up and saw me watching him. We made eye contact. He gave a quick nod, tucked the notebook under his arm, and walked away in the other direction without saying anything. I went back to pulling weeds. A neighbor mentioned a few months later, the way you'd mention a change in weather, that the former board president had listed her house and it had sold. He moved on to another topic before I had much to say about it. The fence is still standing. The survey flags are still in the ground. Everything is exactly where it should be. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Hello all, it's your friendly neighborhood teacher / deli clerk / dad here. I'm at church getting a food box. We're struggling as of late, and I couldn't be more thankful. However, there is a system that the church creates for pickup that some people are not acting so thankful for. We come in, get a number. You can come in as early as 5 a.m. to get a number, and that sticker indicates what space you get in line. It really doesn't matter to me because we all get food and sometimes they super stack the last ones anyway. But today I was called in early to work, so time is of the essence. I got here earlier than usual to get my food box so I can get those extra hours. I pick up sticker 26 and wait an hour or so. They come to open the doors at 9:15 and say prayer and speak about fear, and then we line up to go in. Thing's the system that tends to get screwed up. They say numbers 1 to 10 and then they get in line, however, so long as they're 1 to 10. Then they call the 10 to 20, then the call 20 to 30. I walk up to get in line where I should go and get the stink eye from a man whose family is trying to wedge in front of me. I'm like, fine, whatever, they go by numbers, right? We all start walking in and he lets another 2 people in his family with their own numbers come ahead of me. I start to close the gap because they don't have numbers that are that low, and he says, you gotta go by the number. I say 0 for once and just walk through and wait until the laptop lady because I know she'll know the system. Right when the Clampets try to walk past her, I say, hey, don't we go by numbers? I held my 26 up and they then looked at their numbers, which were 29, his, 45, and 47. The laptop lady, who I now love, says, oh, I'm sorry, we've said this last time, you can't hold a space together to cut. And anyway, he's got a lower number, OP, come on over. Now I agree we're all getting our food bones getting hopped, but time is money. I'm just thankful mine was wasted this time. He tried to do this every time from what I found out. As I walk out with my cart of free food, I see that this guy is still waiting in the 40s for numbers. Now he shakes his head in slight inconvenience. The next one is an entitled people story. A few days ago I posted in AITA and realized something. I may have started doxing myself by speaking of the bottle deposit in my state. I may as well come out and say it since I probably shouldn't be posting here anymore anyway. But I'm not in the part of the US I was previously telling people. I only said it was that part because I didn't want to risk people trying to figure out where I live and who I am. It's pretty much the only thing I fibbed about. But in retrospect, it's probably redundant now that I'm no longer posting about Dan, or my ex-sil, or my parents. Dan and my nibblings are doing great BTW, and yes, Dan is still living in his own camper out of our parents' backyard since he gave his room to his son. He still wants to buy his own truck to go camping with it sometime. But supporting his family comes first before a fun vehicle. And he's still in financial recovery after what his ex-wife put him through, pissing away his savings and racking up debt. And on top of that, Dan has saving for his kids' future colleges to worry about. So a truck is not on the priority list. My parents are doing good. My mother is more emotionally stable around me now. She went through a bad phase of getting stressed at the drop of a feather and apologizing to everyone constantly. Even seeing any sort of story remotely similar to the ones I posted would send her back to therapy. But she's finally making great progress. My father isn't exactly cheerful around me. We're amicable with each other, even drank together a few times. But we lost out on truly bonding as father and son due to the past favoritism for Dan. But he's been working his ass off to better himself, and I appreciate his hard work. My parents can't change the past, so they're just working hard to move forward. As for my ex-sil, she's basically stopped bothering to see her 3 kids she had with Dan at all, and has even been talking about completely giving up her parental rights to them over and over again, but never seems to go through with it despite never being around. She got one hell of a cheese slap in life a year ago when she got a DUI, and had to take classes and remain sober for 6 months, which drove her absolutely nuts. We all expected her to cave and start drinking again when she wasn't supposed to, but she held to it. I guess she was afraid of what would happen if she broke the court order. She got her license back, but currently has to drive with a breathalyzer in her car. She can't have an ounce of alcohol in her, or the car won't drive. She was trying to flirt with Dan off and on for a while, but he never took the bait, so she moved on to dating someone else now, who I bet she's making do everything for her. I guess in a way that's good news for us, but I pity whatever guy she roped in. None of us put baby trapping past her. We're all glad she's out of our lives. But my nibblings still lost their mother because she's an entitled, shopaholic, narcissistic cheater who got karma cheese slapped. Saying she was cheese slapped has become a running gag when talking about her since I first coined that line. My parents, Dan, and several of my friends keep saying, "Oh no, they got cheese slapped," as a joke when karma hits people they know or know of. Not sure if she knows about it or not, but we don't care. I'm pretty sure she was the one who egged my truck on Halloween a year and a half ago, but it's not happened since. Anyway, last week I had a huge bag full of cans I was going to go cash in, and some woman stole them out of the back of my truck while I was having lunch. The bottle drop wasn't far, so I headed that way and caught her lugging my bag of cans. I pulled over and confronted her. She denied the theft until I threatened to call police, and mentioned the place I ate lunch likely caught her on CCTV. She griped about money being tight, and I didn't care. She dropped the bag and cussed me out before I could call the cops. I told this story to some friends later, and only one person was upset with me. And it was the now ex-girlfriend of one of my best friends. I was really worried this incident ruined a relationship, but it turns out the breakup was a long time coming. When I argued with this woman, she yelled at me that the woman who stole the bag of cans out of the back of my truck was possibly homeless, and I went too far chasing her down and making her return the cans. She called me an a-hole who can't give people a break because I was so wronged in the past. And then she sarcastically mocked me by putting on her boyfriend's baseball cap and acting like me in the worst parody way she could do. But nobody was laughing, especially not her now ex-boyfriend. He yanked the hat off her head and told her that went too far. And she yelled that my taking some cans back from a possibly broke or homeless woman was too far and stormed out of the bar. I ended up feeling conflicted after a few more drinks at home and didn't sleep well because the stress made my insomnia act up again. So I posted on Reddit to ask if I was in the wrong and got a pretty much 90% NTA. I couldn't go into full detail in that subreddit because of character limit, though. Well, because my friends know about this Reddit account. It wasn't long at all before I was getting phone calls and text messages, so I logged out and stopped answering comments. Crap was hitting the fan fast. My friend and his now ex-girlfriend had a massive argument over the phone during their lunch breaks, and they officially broke up that evening at his place. The ex-girlfriend also messaged me to call me an ass one more time and told me I'd ruined everything. I didn't respond and just blocked the number. I never gave her my number before either. Jury is still out on how she got it. But it wouldn't have been hard. She could have copied it from my friend's phone or asked someone else who knows. I was really upset and stressed that I was the cause of the breakup. But then my friend came over with some beer and told me that he'd only been dating that woman for 5 or 6 months. And she was constantly nagging him, trying to milk him for money to buy her things, always took alcohol from his fridge to take back to her place without asking, wanted him to pay for every meal when they ate out since the first date, and was constantly on her phone to the point of it being extremely annoying. Even on date night, she was always on her phone. That's pretty much how their Valentine's Day went. He knew. Then he wanted to end things soon because he felt like he was dating an entitled teenager. He also mentioned she was being really rough with him as of late. He wouldn't elaborate on what he meant by rough, so I let it go. Either way, he used the situation to finally end the relationship. He said she screamed and cried, cussed him out, and gaslit by denying all the points he made about her. But he had none of it and told her they were through. She packed any stuff she had in his apartment and left. He said she also tried to take some stuff that wasn't hers too, like his MJ stash and the coffee maker. He loves coffee and has one of those coffee makers that dispenses the coffee from those little plastic cups. She apparently argued that he got her hooked on good coffee, and he could just get another machine. That's when he started filming her and told her to get out before he involved police. He says he's not sure she wanted the coffee maker just for good coffee, or if she just wanted the machine to spite him. Personally, I make my coffee with a plain Jane coffee pot because the other people living in my house share in the morning coffee too. Before that, I just drank instant. Back to my place, I still have a couple of guys renting rooms from me to ease the cost of my mortgage, and you could say those guys are real bros. They came out to join us in drinking beer. The four of us got drunk playing Uno, and he who smelt it, dealt it. And then I finally got some deep sleep, albeit on my couch after too much beer, and only for about 7 hours. My phone's alarm may as well have been nails on a chalkboard to my ears when it went off in the morning. My friend left my phone right near my head after I passed out. That wasn't the only thing he left. I woke up with a square of sandwich cheese on my face. God damn it, he cheese slapped me. I laughed and immediately felt the sting of my hangover. I was too drunk to feel it when he threw it on my face after I passed out, so he just left it there before he went to bed in my room for the night so he wouldn't need to go home. Either way, we both had a painful hangover laugh about it. The both of us had to call in and come to work late to ease our morning hangovers, and I was basically running on energy drinks all day. My friend's ex has not made any more attempts to contact me or him so far. She's blocked a whole bunch of people on her social media, and is essentially out of the whole friend group now. Turns out a lot of people didn't like her anyway, so no one else is losing sleep over it. I really shouldn't be posting here again. But just to clarify a couple of details. The bag I was using to haul the cans was a large transparent bag made to cover mattresses. You can use them as giant garbage bags once they've been taken off the mattress. And a friend of mine works warehousing and delivering mattresses, and he gives the used mattress bags out for free to friends and family. They can hold a lot and don't leak or tear as much as regular garbage bags if in good shape. I also only buy cans and plastic bottles for beverages because they're much lighter than glass when bagged up. Second thing I want to clarify, I did get my friend's permission to make this post since the situation heavily involved him. He's pretty chill about it, and jokingly said I could owe him a 6-pack of talls for the whole mess. And even though he said it as a joke, yesterday I left the 6-pack at his front door with a pink bow on it before ringing the doorbell and bolting. He thought that was pretty funny. Personally, I'm gonna lay off the booze for a little while anyway, so yeah, I hope I don't get tempted to ever come back here to post anything again. Anyway, thank you for watching.